I sent it on a Tuesday morning from the hospital parking garage, sitting in my car with the engine off and the heat fading fast. No capital letters, no exclamation point, nothing that would signal how close I was to the edge. Just, finishing last chemo today. Discharge around 4. Can someone pick me up? I had been in treatment for 11 months. 11 months of early mornings and cold waiting rooms and nurses who learned my name and what kind of crackers I could keep down. 11 months of my hair leaving in stages, first slowly, then all at once, like it had somewhere more important to be. My husband had left 8 months before the diagnosis. Not because of the cancer he didn't know yet. He left because, as he put it, he needed someone who still had energy for life. I didn't fight him on it. I was tired before the cancer. The cancer just gave the tiredness a name. So I had no one to drive me. That sounds dramatic until you understand how ordinary it actually was. I had family. I had my older sister, who lived 20 minutes away and worked from home 3 days a week. I had my mother, retired, with a car she drove mostly to the grocery store and back. I had my younger brother, between jobs, with more free time than reasons to fill it. And I had a group chat with all 3 of them, called Family Always, which my mother had named herself, back when that still felt true. I stared at my phone after I sent the message. Watched the little check marks appear. Watched the scene notification populate one by one. 3 people, 3 reads. Then nothing for 4 minutes. Then my sister. I have a client call at 3:30. Can't move it. Sorry. Then my mother, 2 minutes after, I told you to set this up ahead of time. I can't just drop everything. My brother didn't reply at all. Not then. Not later. I put my phone face down on the passenger seat. I sat there for a moment. Not crying, not angry. Just absorbing it the way you absorb cold, not all at once, but slowly, until you realize you've been shaking for a while. Then I typed back one word, okay. Lowercase, no period. And I went inside for my last infusion. Here's what no one tells you about the last day of chemotherapy. You expect relief. You expect balloons, maybe. A nurse hands you a certificate. There's a bell on the wall. Some patients ring. There are people who bring their whole families and cry in the hallway and take photos. That day, there were 3 other patients finishing treatment. 2 of them had their people. One woman had her husband and both her adult daughters, and they were crying before the IV was even out. I watched from across the room while a volunteer handed me a small card that said, "You did it." I put it in my coat pocket and said thank you to a woman whose name I never asked. The Uber cost $34. The driver had the radio on low and didn't ask me anything, which I was grateful for. When I got home, I unlocked the door, put my bag down, and stood in the kitchen for a moment in the particular quiet that belongs only to people who live alone. Then I opened the group chat and turned the notifications off. I didn't leave. I didn't say anything. I just went silent. I didn't post about it. I didn't call anyone to report what had happened. I made tea and sat on the couch and watched the kind of television that doesn't require anything from you, and I let the day finish itself without me. But something had shifted. Not in a dramatic way, not the way people describe epiphanies in movies. More like a lock turning. Quiet, final. I had been spending 11 months trying to need as little as possible, trying to be sick in a way that didn't inconvenience people, trying to apologize for the inconvenience of my own survival. And somewhere on that car ride home, I stopped. The next morning, my coworker texted me. Her name was Diane, and she was the kind of woman who brought soup without being asked, and then pretended she'd made too much by accident. She was 10 years older than me and had raised 2 kids mostly on her own and had the kind of calm that comes from surviving things that don't fit in a sentence. She wrote, "Last day was yesterday, right? How'd it go? Do you need anything?" I almost said I was fine. I had the words typed. Then I deleted them and I told her the truth. I told her about the group chat, about the Uber, about the woman with her daughters and the bell I didn't ring. I told her all of it in a block of text I immediately regretted sending, the kind of message you write when you're more tired than proud. She didn't respond right away. I thought maybe I'd said too much. Then my phone buzzed. Not a text, my doorbell camera. Diane was standing on my porch with a paper bag from the diner 2 blocks over and a thermos of coffee, and she had driven 40 minutes from her side of the city to get there. I opened the door, and she looked at me and said, simply, "You rang the bell." I heard it, and I completely fell apart on my own front porch on a Wednesday morning in November. She stayed for 3 hours. She didn't ask me to explain anything or be okay about anything. She ate half a sandwich and told me stories about her son's terrible taste in girlfriends and the time she accidentally dyed her hair green, and I laughed for the first time in longer than I could measure. When she left, she squeezed my hand and said, "You don't owe anyone smallness." I didn't know what to do with that sentence, so I just carried it. What happened next, I did not plan. I want to be clear about that because people later assumed there was a strategy, that I had calculated every step. There wasn't. I was just a woman finishing cancer treatment who started telling the truth. I had a follow-up appointment 2 weeks later, and my doctor asked how I was adjusting. I told her about coming home alone. She got very still, the way doctors do when something lands differently than they expected, and then she said, "That happens more than you'd think. Especially with single patients. There's a real gap there." Then she asked if she could share my name with someone at the hospital foundation who was looking at patient support programs. I said yes without fully knowing why. The woman from the foundation called the following week. Her name was Rosa, and she was direct and warm in equal measure. The kind of person who asks questions like she actually wants the answers. She asked me to describe the experience of finishing treatment alone, not for a form, just so she could understand it. I talked for 40 minutes. She listened without interrupting once. At the end, she said, "Would you be willing to share this with our board?" I said, "I'll think about it." Then I called Diane and asked her what she thought. She said, "I think you should say yes and wear something that makes you feel like yourself." So I did. The board meeting was a small room, oval table, 8 people in chairs that probably cost more than my car. I had expected to feel out of place. I didn't. I sat down, and I told them what I told Rosa. I told them about the parking garage, about the group chat, about the Uber driver with the radio on low, about Diane on the porch, about the bell I didn't ring and why. One of the board members, a woman in her 60s who had been taking notes the whole time, looked up when I finished and said, "How many people do you think leave treatment like this?" I said, "I don't know." But I wasn't looking for extraordinary. I was looking for a ride home. The room was very quiet for a moment. They funded the pilot program in 6 weeks. Meanwhile, the family group chat had been quiet since my one-word reply. 14 days of nothing. I didn't reach out. I didn't explain. I had decided, somewhere in the space between diagnosis and now, that I was done explaining myself to people who had chosen not to show up. Not out of cruelty, just out of clarity. You stop watering flowers that have already decided not to grow. My sister texted me privately on a Thursday night. She said, "I heard you're doing some project at the hospital. Mom mentioned it." I found it interesting that my mother knew. Interesting that the information traveled, but the apology didn't. I read the message twice, then put my phone down. The next morning, I wrote back, "It's going well, thanks. Clean. Accurate. A closed door with the lights off." My brother sent a meme. A get well soon meme, the automatic kind. 11 weeks after my last treatment. I didn't respond to it, but I noticed it. I noticed the distance between that meme and the 40-minute drive Diane had made without being asked, and I understood something clearly then. Some people love you from the couch. Others get in the car. The pilot program launched on a Thursday in January. We called it The Return. Simple, direct. The idea was straightforward. No one finishing chemotherapy should have to take an Uber home alone. Volunteer drivers. Trained. A coordination system through the hospital. A text, sent the morning of discharge, confirming that someone was coming. That someone had a name. That someone knew yours. The first pickup was a woman named Carol, 63, finishing her last infusion for breast cancer. Her son lived out of state. Her neighbor had offered but canceled. She had quietly booked a rideshare and told no one she was upset about it. Our volunteer, a retired teacher named Margaret, arrived 20 minutes early. She brought a small plant, not flowers, a plant, something Carol could keep alive. She said later that no one had told her to do that. She just thought, this woman is going home to a quiet house, and she deserves something that stays. Carol cried in the car. Margaret drove and didn't try to fix it. That's the part I keep coming back to. The not fixing. The willingness to just be present inside someone else's hard moment without making it about comfort or resolution. That's the thing families forget. You don't have to have the right words. You just have to show up. The story got out the way these things do slowly, then all at once. A patient mentioned it to her therapist, who mentioned it to a journalist she knew, who called Rosa, who called me. The article ran on a Tuesday. It wasn't front page. It was the local section, below the fold, with a photo of Margaret and Carol in the hospital parking lot, plant between them, both squinting a little in the winter light. My mother called me that evening. I watched the phone ring. I let it go to voicemail. She said, I saw the article. I'm proud of you. I didn't know things were that hard. I thought you were handling it. She paused. I should have called more. Another pause. I'm sorry, sweetheart, I really am. I listened to it twice. Then I saved it. Not because I needed it, but because I wanted to remember what it sounded like, a real apology arriving too late to change the weight of what it was apologizing for. There's a difference between an apology and a repair. She offered the first one. The second one takes longer. I wasn't ready to start the clock on it yet. My sister texted. That article? Was that you? I replied, yes. She said, I didn't realize how much you were going through. I thought about what to write back for a long time. Finally I sent, you could have asked. She didn't reply. That was fine. My brother called 2 weeks later. He was awkward on the phone in the way people are when they've been practicing what to say and the script isn't landing. He said he was sorry. He said he'd been dealing with some things. He said he hadn't thought about how it sounded, the not replying, the not coming. I listened. I didn't rescue him from the silence when he ran out of words. At the end I said, I believe you. And I need some time. He said, okay. And that was that. Honest, incomplete. A beginning, maybe, but not yet. The program expanded in April. 3 hospitals. 47 volunteers. A donation from a woman who had lost her mother to cancer the previous year and found out, only after, that her mother had been taking ride shares to and from every single treatment because she hadn't wanted to bother anyone. She wrote in her donation note, no one should disappear into their own illness. I framed it and put it on the wall of our tiny office, which was technically a converted storage closet that Rosa had cleared out and painted white, and called our headquarters with a completely straight face. I spoke at a fundraiser in May. It was a proper event, round tables, centerpieces, people in blazers. I had notes but didn't use them. I talked about the parking garage, the group chat, the word okay that I sent back because I didn't have the energy for anything larger. I talked about what it felt like to finish something enormous and come home to silence. I talked about Diane and the thermos of coffee and the sentence I've been carrying ever since. Then I said, the loneliest moment of my life was not the diagnosis. It was the Uber ride home on the last day when it became clear that the people I expected to show up had decided it wasn't their moment to move. The second loneliest moment was realizing I had believed them. That their absence meant I wasn't worth showing up for. I paused. It took strangers to teach me that wasn't true. There was a long moment of quiet in the room. Then someone in the back started clapping, and it moved forward through the tables like water. That night, I got a message from someone I'd gone to college with, someone I hadn't spoken to in 6 years. She said, I just heard about the return. My aunt is starting treatment next month. She lives alone. Can I refer her? I wrote back immediately, yes. Always yes. Afterward, when the event was wrapping up and I was gathering my things from a chair near the back, someone touched my arm. I turned around. It was my mother. She was wearing her good coat, the charcoal one she only brought out for occasions, and her eyes were very bright. She said, "I didn't buy a ticket. I snuck in. I hope that's okay." I looked at her for a moment. Then I said, "You showed up. That's the part that counts." She reached out and took my hand and held it, and I let her, and we didn't say anything else. My brother was standing by the door. He had his hands in his pockets, and he was looking at the floor. I didn't wave him over. I didn't make it easy. But I also didn't leave without letting him see me, standing steady, surrounded by people who had chosen to be there, in a room that existed because the people who should have shown up once didn't. Sometimes that's how accountability works. Not in a confrontation. Not in a screaming match or a call-out or a long text at midnight. Sometimes it's just them watching from the edge of something you built without them, understanding finally what they stepped back from. Too late to undo it, but not, maybe, too late to do differently from here. I still don't call my sister on Sundays the way I used to. I still haven't reopened the group chat. Some things have a before and an after, and you don't always get to go back to before, not because you're punishing anyone, but because you've moved. Because the version of you that waited by the phone for someone to think of her is gone, and the person who replaced her doesn't need to perform forgiveness to prove she's healed. I forgave them privately, quietly, on a morning in late spring when I was packing a care bag for a new patient and I put in the same kind of crackers the nurses used to bring me, and I realized I was no longer angry. I was just further down the road. They were somewhere behind me, and I wished them well from where I stood, and I kept moving. What I know now is this. Grief and illness and hard moments have a way of clarifying who people are, not because people become different in a crisis, but because they become more exactly themselves. My family was never going to be the kind that drops everything and drives 40 minutes with coffee. They just weren't. That's not evil. It's a specific kind of smallness that lives inside love and doesn't know it's missing anything. Diane knew. Margaret knew. The woman who donated in her mother's name knew. Carol, who kept that plant alive through the whole winter and sent us a photo of it in March when it bloomed, she knew. These people made a different choice with the same 24 hours, and that choice built something real. The return now has a wait list for volunteers. People want to drive. People want to sit in parking garages and hold thermoses and bring plants and say, "You're not going home alone." It turns out there are more people like Diane in the world than I knew. I just had to stop looking in the direction of the people who weren't. If you're reading this from a parking garage somewhere, phone in hand, waiting for someone to reply, I want you to know. The silence is information, not verdict. It tells you where to stop watering. It does not tell you what you're worth. Someone is already getting in the car. You just haven't met them yet.